Hello and welcome to my Independent and Read Aloud book choices for the 22-23 homeschool year. I'm Rebecca. I'm a homeschool mom of 2 kids, ages 12 and 9, and making our book choices for the year is one of my favorite decisions to make for our homeschool. I use a variety of resources, so Brave Writer is a big part of our decision-making process. I look for book lists, Honey for a Child's Heart, Read Aloud Revival, book lists for curriculum that I love like Beautiful Feet, and here on YouTube, just recommendations that I hear as well. So without further ado, here they are. So the first section that I'm going to share about is our family read alouds for school. Sawajawea by Joseph Bruchac is a book that alternates the viewpoint between William Clark as well as Sawajawea herself. I really like that it is written by Joseph Bruchac because it does feel like an own voices book. We are sure to be getting a healthy perspective from Sawajawea and not the typical viewpoint that a lot of books that tell her story can come from. We will listen to this on Audible. It comes free with our membership. It's already in our account, and so we will listen to this during school time together. The next book that we will read is By the Great Horn Spoon by Sid Fleischman. He is a Newbery Medal winning author, and the story that this tells is one of a boy and his butler who end up getting involved in the California gold rush. My understanding is that this is a very adventurous and humorous story. There is some danger, I think, in it, and I just think it will be a really great read aloud for us. The next read aloud that we have is Across 5 Aprils by Irene Hunt. This was almost a Newbery Medal winning book. It is recommended in the Beautiful Feet curricula for American history during the Civil War. And while I think it does tackle some pretty heavy topics, I think it will be age appropriate. And since I will be reading it out loud, I can always make sure that it is appropriate for my youngest. The next book that I want to do as a read aloud is Gladys Aylward. This is actually one of my favorite books I've ever read, let alone the series written by Janet and Jeff Benge. So you've probably heard a lot about these books, but Gladys Aylward is my favorite, and I'm very excited to share this story with my kids. For the Dust Bowl and the 30s, I'm debating between these two. We might read both of them, but I might also just choose Bud Not Buddy and have my oldest just read this on her own. Bud Not Buddy is a Newbery Medal winner. This is a story about a boy who is motherless and doesn't know that much about his father, but he decides he's going to go on an adventure and try to find out who his father really is. And since he's on his own, I just love the adventure appeal that this has, and I'm hoping to do some rabbit trails into jazz and learn more about that. And the other thing is, I'm really interested in continuing in this series that he wrote, so that is the highest contender. And then I have Out of the Dust by Karen Heese. This is also a Newbery Medal, and it is a book in verse, and this is about a girl in the 30s who has to live obviously through the Dust Bowl. I think it's not the most uplifting, which of course because of the time period. What I read was that it is Grapes of Wrath for children, and to be honest, Grapes of Wrath is not my favorite Steinbeck. So this is still out for, you know, potential, but I do like the idea of it being a book in verse and giving a good perspective of what went on during the Dust Bowl. And then next we have A Long Way From Home by Richard Peck. This is a Newbery Honor book. This is also during the 30s as well. And the reason why I chose this as a read aloud is because I think it's a bunch of different short stories all combined into one book. I mean, something that I read says that these kids, Joey and his sister Mary Alice, go on adventures with the most dangerous person in their life, and that is their grandmother. Apparently she's just crazy and funny hijinks ensue, and so I'm excited to just read this and not have the pressure of finishing a story, but just to read all of the different short stories in here. So next I'll go through the books that we have for my 7th grader to read. So the first book for my 7th grader to read is The Ruins of Gorlan by John Flanagan. This is called The Ranger's Apprentice, and it is book 1 in a pretty long series from what I understand. This is a Brave Writer book, and it is a fantasy, and quite frankly, I want to read this as well. Next is The Sign of the Beaver by Elizabeth Geroge-Speare. I really enjoy her writing. The Witch of Blackbird Pond was always one of my favorites, and I read this a long time ago. If I recall, the character is Matt, and his father and he build a cabin in the woods of Maine, and then his father has to leave and go down to, I think, somewhere in Boston to get the rest of the family and to bring them up to the cabin. And Matt gets left there, and he develops a relationship with the natives in the area. And then I think at some point he has to make a decision on, does he stay and wait for his family without knowing if they're actually coming, or if he joins a local native tribe. And I think it has to do with like preparing for winter, and he's not sure if he can make it through the winter alone. Next, I have The Ballad of Lucy Whipple. This is the story, I think, of a girl who leaves the East Coast and travels to the West Coast. And so I think this is like the gold rush time frame. And this is by Karen Cushman, who wrote The Midwife's Apprentice and won a Newbery for it. And next is The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle. This is a Newbery honor book by Avi, and this is the story of Charlotte Doyle, who travels on a ship, and I think at some point she gets accused of a crime, and I think it might even be murder, and she has to go through trial. The back marketing blurb says that she actually was found guilty. Next, we have Code Talker. This is the story of the Navajo natives who helped send messages in World War II, I think. And because other codes were so well known, the Navajo language was a successful way for codes to be sent for secrets. And this is also a Brave Writer book that we are doing a class for. Next is Dragonwings by Lawrence Yep. This is a Newbery Honor Award book. And this is the story about a boy who leaves China and sails to America. And I think this addresses the challenges that he has as a Chinese person in San Francisco. And I think this also has the Great San Francisco Earthquake in there as well. We have A Gathering of Days, a New England Girl's Journal from 1830 to 1832. This is a Newbery Honor Medal by Joan Bloss, and it is in an epistolary format with a diary. And I really think my oldest will blow through this, but I love having these diary style books because I think it encourages her to keep her own journal. Another one is Wild Like the Foxes by Anauta Ford Blackmore. And this is a Good and the Beautiful book. It is a level 8 and it is part of their book study that they do. And right now their book studies are offered for free. They're offering their language arts all the way up to 8th grade for free. And so I will download the book study and we will read this. And my understanding is that because it is written by Miss Blackmore and not edited or changed by Jenny Phillips, as some of her books are, that this is an Own Voices book. And that was the reason why I wanted to add this in as well. I'm adding this slim version of Rachel Carson's biography, and it's written by Kathleen Kudlinski. It is a Women of Our Time series. And while we have some other books that have Rachel Carson in there, I just wanted to add a biography so that we could talk about this kind of format of a book and start introducing more biographies. And of course, Rachel Carson is an incredible one to start with. The next historical fiction that we have is Breaking Stalin's Nose. This is a Newbery Honor book. It's by Eugene Belchin. And this is the story about Sasha, who is been pegged to join a Young Pioneer, which is a group of kids who are trained to work for Stalin. And he's supposed to be, he's going to become this young Soviet pioneer. And then it turns out that his father is taken and I guess put in a gulag. And he kind of realizes that maybe being a young Stalin is not what he actually wants. I've heard really great things about this book. So next I have A Little Singing Bird by Lucy M. Blanchard. This is also a Good and the Beautiful library book as well. And this is also a level 8, but it's not part of their book study, it's just part of the library. And this is the story about a girl who lives in Italy, and it is set in World War I. This is The Singing Tree by Kate Seredy. This is the sequel to The Good Master, which we have read. This is a Newbery Honor book, and it is set in Hungary and is a really great viewpoint from Europe about the Great War, which is World War I, with Russia and Germany and Hungary. Next is Esperanza Rising by Pam Munoz Ryan. This is one that I actually have read. It is a Pora Belpré Award. She's a really great author. I loved this story. There are some mature themes in here with older siblings and wanting relationships that maybe are not the healthiest for them, but it's a really great perspective from migrant workers and the challenges that they went through. And so I wanted to start introducing my daughter to that time in history by having her read Esperanza Rising. So the next three that I have, I think, are pretty similar perspectives. I know I'm going to have her read Paper Wishes. It is the story of a Japanese family in 1942 that is in an internment camp. So again, I've heard really great things about Paper Wishes. There's also this by Mender de Jong, and it's illustrated by Mari Sendak, and it is a Newbery Honor book, The House of 60 Fathers. It is also from a Japanese perspective, but it is actually in Japan. So while they're in an internment camp in California, they are escaping the Japanese army by floating down river in a boat, and it ends up being this main character, Tam Pao, and his lucky pig. And he is on the search for his family and his home. Mender de Jong also wrote The Wheel in the School, which I read. That one is really good, but it is slow moving, so I'm wondering if this is also. But these two I know we want to read. This is one I found in a little free library. It's called Journey to Topaz by Yoshiko Uchida, and it is also about a Japanese family that are sent to a camp after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and all of the separations that happen within families because of these camps. So I wanted to offer these as options, and we'll see how many she wants to read or is interested in reading. For World War II, I have chosen these three as options. And it is Lily's Crossing by Patricia Riley Giff, which is a Newbery Honor Medal. This is the story of Lily. She lives with her father and her grandmother. They decide to go to her grandmother's summer house in New York. And her father gets drafted, and she befriends Albert. I think his name is Albert, who is a boy whose family lives in Hungary and I think has an anti-Nazi newspaper, and they send him to America, and she befriends him. And I think there's this realization that telling lies is dangerous, and I think this is kind of your coming of age during war type novel. Again, really great things I've heard about that. This is a Newbery Medal. I'm sure you've heard of it. Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. I just read an interesting article about the girl that is on the cover of most of these books, but this is set in Sweden, in Copenhagen, and about the plight of the Jews and the Nazis takeover, and how families hid Jewish people in plain sight to try to save them. The Length of a String, I heard about this on, I think, the Curly Readers Booktube channel. It is an interesting perspective, but it starts in the modern time, but the main character discovers a journal that talks about her grandmother back in Nazi-occupied Luxembourg, and how her parents sent her to Brooklyn, New York. And so it's her finding out about her ancestors and what happened, and how she was able to come from Luxembourg to the United States. For the civil rights movement, we have This Promise of Change by Joanne Allen Boyce and Debbie Levy. This is one girl's story in the fight for school equality, and it is a book in verse. And it's set in 1956 American South. So for the Vietnam era, we have Until Tomorrow, Mr. Marsworth by Sheila O'Connor. So I saw this on the Life Between Words Booktube. I'll make sure that I link her below as well. But this is an epistolary novel. It is letters between a girl named Irene and her neighbor, Mr. Marsworth, and her brother gets drafted, and she's really trying to prevent her brother from being sent over to Vietnam. And so I think she appeals to him for help. And then next we have Inside Out and Back Again. It is a Newbery Honor Book and won the National Book Award, and it is by Tanaha Lai. And this is set in Saigon. So that's what I really love, is that it's during the same time period, but they're from two completely different perspectives. And so she ends up having to flee her home as Saigon falls during the Vietnam War, and has to figure out how to adapt and adjust. And again, I've heard such great things about both of these books. Again, this list is not comprehensive, so we may decide to add some more in and even possibly take some of these out, but it is just a kind of wish list of what we want to get to. So these are the books that my 9-year-old will be reading for this school year. So first we have The Flanagan, The Life on the River by Gloria Whelan. We will pair this with The Louisiana Purchase since there's so much river writing in that book, but you can see it is actually about a girl who has a pet raccoon who lives on a riverboat. And my oldest read this when we went through this time period and loved it. And so I think my youngest will love it as well. Next, we like the American Girl doll historical fiction books. And we will be adding Josefina's Surprise in here. And while my youngest will read them, my oldest will probably grab a hold of them and read them as well. I only have 1, 2, and 3. But if he's interested in reading more, we can always get the remaining ones from the library. For when we get to the Wild West, I have Dear Levi, Letters from the Overland Trail, and this is the story about hazardous escapades as a boy, Levi, in 1851, does the Oregon Trail by wagon. And then next I have The Heart of a Samurai by Margie Prius. This is a Newbery Honor book. This is the story of a boy's adventures. He and I think some friends get stranded on an island, and then they get picked up by a whaling ship, and then he spends the next decade, I think, working on the whaling ship. He ends up getting to America at some point, and people say that this is really an adventure novel and very exciting. And I just love that it's got like the spears, the harpoons. And I do think that my youngest will really love this. He wants to read Island of the Blue Dolphins, but of course is too young yet. And so I'm hoping this will appease him for a bit. So as we get to the Civil War era, we have Dear Austin, which is the same theme as the Dear Levi by Elvira Woodruff. And this is an epistolary novel that is sharing about people who are helping on the Underground Railroad. And then I will also have my youngest read these American Girl doll books. Again, my oldest will probably pick them up as well, and I still only have the first 3, so if they are interested in reading the whole set, I will just grab the rest from the library. This is about Addie, and this is right around the Civil War era. One of the things that I really like about these books is that they have phenomenal back matter. So for an introduction into biography, I have The Story of Thomas Alva Edison, an inventor by Margaret Davidson. It's a lot of graphics and very big print. So I think my youngest will really enjoy this and probably get through it really quickly. I also have Sarah Plain and Tall by Patricia McLaughlin. This is such a great story about the American spirit and being out in the plains and the love that people have for the area that they are born in, but your resilience to adjust to where you are. This is also a Newbery Medal winning book. And then I have a lot more in the series, and so if he wants to keep going with it, he certainly can. For World War I, we have Ruthie's Gift by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. My oldest read this. It's a really cute story. Her brother has to end up going to war in World War I. And so I just like this as a great introductory book to give kids a perspective about World War I. Pretty big print and some pictures in there. So it's just a really good introductory novel for World War I. And then I have Blue Willow. This is for the 30s. And I don't know. We'll see about this one. I don't know how exciting it is. It does have some illustrations in it. And it's about a girl who has this beautiful blue plate. It's basically her only possession, and there's a threat of she may have to get rid of it or sell it in order for them to be able to eat or have a place to live. And then we have 20 and 10. This is by Claire Hutchett Bishop. This is in the Good and the Beautiful, one of their language art sections, and I just saved it for my youngest to read. And it is the story about German occupation and French children who ended up needing to hide. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear what you're planning on having your kids read this homeschool year, or even what middle grade you're planning on reading yourself. Until next time.